Sarah Mitchell thought she was living a fairy tale marriage, but she was actually the prey in a decades-long hunting game where insurance policies were more valuable than human lives. What Sarah discovered next would expose a criminal empire built on the graves of inconvenient women and reveal that her own mother-in-law was the mastermind behind it all. This is the true story of how one pregnant woman brought down a family of killers, but not before they tried everything to silence her forever. Stay with me, because what happens next will change how you see the perfect marriages around you. The question isn't whether Sarah will survive, it's whether anyone is safe when love becomes a weapon and pregnancy becomes a death sentence. 3 sharp knocks echoed through the house. Sarah Mitchell's coffee mug slipped from her hands, crashing against the kitchen floor. The ceramic shattered into a dozen pieces, dark liquid spreading across the white tiles like spilled secrets. "Mrs. Mitchell, FBI, we need to talk." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her rounded belly. 7 months pregnant, she moved carefully toward the front door. Her bare feet avoided the coffee puddle as she padded across the hardwood floors of their suburban home. Through the peephole, she saw 3 figures in dark suits. Official badges glinted in the morning sunlight. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What's this about?" she called through the door. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you immediately. It's regarding your husband, Richard Mitchell." Sarah unlocked the deadbolt with trembling fingers. The door swung open to reveal a woman in her 40s with kind but serious eyes. 2 male agents flanked her, their expressions unreadable. "I'm Detective Maria Torres, FBI. These are Agents Williams and Johnson. May we come in?" Sarah stepped aside, her mind racing. Rick had left for work early that morning, kissing her forehead and placing his hand on her belly as always. "Good morning, little one," he'd whispered to their unborn daughter. The same ritual for 3 months now. "Is Rick okay? Has something happened to him?" Detective Torres guided Sarah to the living room couch. The morning light streamed through their bay windows, illuminating the carefully decorated space. Everything perfect, everything in its place, just how Rick liked it. "Mrs. Mitchell, your husband is in custody." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She sank deeper into the cushions, her hand never leaving her belly. "Custody for what?" "He's been charged with solicitation of murder." Sarah's world tilted sideways. The room spun slowly, colors bleeding together. "Murder, that's impossible. Rick wouldn't hurt anyone." Detective Torres sat across from her, leaning forward with gentle intensity. "Mrs. Mitchell, your husband hired someone to kill you." The silence stretched between them. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, loud and erratic. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her mother's distress. "That's not possible," Sarah whispered. "We're having a baby. We planned this pregnancy. We picked out names together. We painted the nursery last weekend. The man he hired was an FBI informant named Jake Morrison. We have recordings of their conversations. Multiple meetings, financial transactions. Your husband has been planning this for months." Sarah's breathing became shallow. She pressed both hands against her belly, feeling the baby's movements. Real, solid, unlike everything else dissolving around her. "Why would he want to hurt me? I don't understand." Agent Williams spoke for the first time. "We believe he wanted to make it look like an accident, pregnancy complications, something that wouldn't raise suspicion." The coffee stain on the kitchen floor caught Sarah's eye through the doorway, dark and spreading, seeping into the grout lines. Permanent damage to something she'd tried to keep perfect. "He loves me," Sarah said, but the words felt hollow. "We've been married 5 years. He proposed on our 2nd anniversary. He said I was the best thing that ever happened to him." Detective Torres pulled out a tablet. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to play you something. It's difficult to hear, but you need to know what we're dealing with." The recording crackled to life. Rick's voice filled the living room, as familiar as her own heartbeat. But the words coming from his mouth belonged to a stranger. "Make it look like an accident. She's 7 months pregnant. Stress can cause complications, heart problems, stroke. Things happen." Sarah's vision blurred. The voice was definitely Rick's, the same tone he used during business calls, calm and methodical. But he was discussing her death with the same detachment he reserved for quarterly reports. "Can you do it?" Rick's recorded voice continued. A rougher voice responded. For the right price. Sure. When do you want it done? Soon? Before the baby comes? The insurance policy pays double if she dies during pregnancy. Natural causes clause. Sarah doubled over, nausea washing through her. The baby kicked frantically, responding to her mother's elevated heart rate and stress hormones. I need to use the bathroom. She managed. Detective Torres helped her to the powder room. Sarah locked the door and gripped the marble countertop. In the mirror, her reflection looked like a ghost. Pale skin, wide eyes, dark circles underneath. When had she started looking so tired? The pregnancy had been difficult. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Dizzy spells. Headaches. Rick had been so attentive, bringing her tea, insisting she rest, making sure she stayed home instead of going out with friends. Had he been trying to weaken her? Make her more vulnerable, Sarah splashed cold water on her face and returned to the living room. The agents waited patiently, giving her time to process the impossible. Mrs. Mitchell, we arrested your husband this morning at his office. He believes the plan is still moving forward. He doesn't know Jake Morrison is FBI. How long have you been watching him? 3 weeks. Morrison approached us when your husband first made contact. We've been building a case ever since. Sarah sank back onto the couch. 3 weeks ago, she'd complained about feeling lonely. Rick had been working late every night, coming home after she was already asleep. She'd asked if they could spend more time together before the baby arrived. He'd kissed her forehead and promised things would calm down after the holidays. After the baby, after life got back to normal. Normal. As if planning his wife's murder was just another item on his business calendar. What happens now? Sarah asked. We need your help, your testimony, and we need to make sure you're safe. Safe, but he's in jail now. Detective Torres exchanged glances with her colleagues. Mrs. Mitchell, we have reason to believe your husband may not have been working alone. His mother, Helen Mitchell, may have been involved in the planning. We're still investigating. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Helen Mitchell, the woman who'd never thought Sarah was good enough for her son. Who'd made subtle comments about Sarah's spending habits, her career choices, her decision to get pregnant. We're going to station officers outside your home, and we'd like you to consider staying somewhere else temporarily. Do you have family nearby? Sarah thought of her parents in Oregon, her sister in Denver, friends who'd gradually fallen away over the past few years as Rick became more demanding of her time and attention. I don't know, she admitted. I need to think. The baby shifted inside her, a rolling movement that pressed against her ribs. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to imagine explaining this to her daughter someday. How do you tell a child that her father tried to kill her mother before she was even born? Mrs. Mitchell, there's something else you should know. We've been investigating a pattern. Your husband's first wife died in a car accident 6 years ago, right before their divorce was finalized. The room went completely silent. Sarah could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, marking seconds that felt like hours. Angela, Sarah whispered. He told me she died in a car accident. He was devastated. It's why he was so careful about everything. Why he worried so much about my safety. Detective Torres nodded grimly. We're reopening that investigation. Sarah stood up slowly, her pregnant body protesting the sudden movement. She walked to the mantel where their wedding photos sat in silver frames. Rick's arm around her waist, both of them smiling at the camera, his hand resting possessively on her hip. How many wives can one man lose to accidents before someone gets suspicious? She asked the room. That's exactly what we're trying to find out, Detective Torres replied. The baby kicked hard, and Sarah gasped. For the first time since the agents arrived, she smiled slightly. She's strong, Sarah said, rubbing her belly. Stronger than he thinks. Detective Torres set up a recording device on Sarah's dining room table. The mahogany surface gleamed under the chandelier Rick had insisted on installing. Everything in their house was expensive, tasteful, designed to impress. Are you ready to hear more? Torres asked gently. Sarah nodded, though her hands shook as she reached for the glass of water Agent Williams had brought her. The ice clinked against the sides, a sound that reminded her of the dinner parties Rick hosted for his business associates. She'd always played the perfect hostess, smiling and nodding at conversations about market projections and profit margins. This recording is from 4 days ago, Torres explained. Your husband met Jake Morrison at a coffee shop downtown. The audio quality was clearer this time. Sarah could hear the ambient noise of the coffee shop, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other conversations. And then Rick's voice, unmistakable. I've been thinking about timing, he said. It needs to happen before she delivers. The insurance policy has specific clauses about pregnancy-related deaths. The payout is substantially higher. Sarah's breath caught. Rick had updated their life insurance just 3 months ago, right after they'd confirmed the pregnancy. He'd claimed it was responsible planning for their growing family. What about the baby? The rougher voice belonged to Jake Morrison, the FBI informant. Complications happen. Stress-induced labor, premature birth. If the baby doesn't survive, that's unfortunate, but not my primary concern. Sarah stood up so quickly that her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. She rushed to the powder room again, barely making it before she was violently sick. When she returned, Detective Torres had paused the recording. I know this is difficult, Torres said, but we need you to understand the full scope of what your husband was planning. He wanted our baby to die too, Sarah whispered, his own child. The insurance policy includes provisions for the child. If both mother and baby die during delivery, the payout is close to $2 million. $2 million. Sarah thought about Rick's recent stress over the company's quarterly earnings, the late-night phone calls with his accountant, the way he'd been pushing for her to quit her marketing job and stay home permanently. Had her death been a business decision, Torres continued the recording. Rick's voice filled the room again, discussing logistics with chilling precision. She has a doctor's appointment next Tuesday at 2:30. She'll be driving alone. Her usual route takes her down Maple Street, past the construction zone. Traffic moves slowly there. Sarah's blood ran cold. She remembered that appointment. Dr. Warren had wanted to check on some irregularities in her latest blood work. Rick had offered to drive her, but she'd insisted on going alone. She'd wanted to stop at the baby store afterward, to look at cribs. That's too public, Morrison's voice responded. Too many potential witnesses. Then what do you suggest? Home invasion. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Pregnant woman tries to defend herself, gets hurt, complications set in. Sarah wrapped her arms around her belly protectively. The baby seemed unusually quiet, as if sensing the danger even from inside the womb. When Rick asked, soon? This week? Maybe next. I need to study her routine, figure out when she's most vulnerable. Torres stopped the recording. This conversation took place Tuesday. Today is Friday. According to the timeline they discussed, he was planning to move forward immediately. Sarah walked to the living room window and looked out at their quiet suburban street. Maple trees lined the sidewalks, their leaves turning brilliant shades of orange and red. Halloween decorations adorned the neighbors' porches. Everything looked so normal, so safe. Mrs. Mitchell, can you think of any recent changes in your husband's behavior? Anything that seemed unusual? Sarah turned back to the agents. He's been working late more often, coming home after I'm asleep. He says he's busy with a new acquisition, but she paused, remembering something. Last week, he asked me detailed questions about my daily schedule. When I go grocery shopping, when I see friends, when I'm home alone. Did that seem strange to you? A little, but he said he was worried about my safety, that pregnant women are targets for criminals. Agent Williams made notes on his tablet. What about his relationship with his mother? How often does she visit? Helen comes by twice a week, sometimes more. She has very strong opinions about how I should be handling the pregnancy, what I should eat, how much I should rest, where I should deliver the baby. Sarah thought about Helen's last visit, just 3 days ago. She'd brought prenatal vitamins, insisting that Sarah's regular ones weren't adequate. She'd also asked probing questions about Sarah's will, about what provisions they'd made for the baby's care if something happened to Sarah. She wanted to know about my life insurance beneficiaries, Sarah admitted. She said it was important to have everything properly documented before the baby arrived. The agents exchanged meaningful looks. Mrs. Mitchell, we'd like to search your house. Specifically, we're looking for any communications between your husband and his mother, any financial documents, anything that might indicate a broader conspiracy. Sarah nodded numbly. The office is upstairs. Rick keeps all his important papers in there. As the agents began their search, Sarah found herself drawn to the nursery. She and Rick had spent weeks decorating it, choosing colors and furniture together. Soft yellow walls because they'd wanted to be surprised by the baby's gender. A white crib with delicate flower details. A rocking chair where Sarah imagined nursing her daughter. She sat in the rocking chair now, her hands resting on her belly. The baby kicked gently, a reassuring reminder of the life growing inside her. On the dresser, Sarah noticed the baby monitor Rick had insisted on installing early. "For when she arrives," he'd said, "we want to make sure we can hear everything." But now Sarah wondered if the monitor served another purpose. Had Rick been planning to use it to time his wife's murder, to make sure she was alone and vulnerable? The thought made her sick again. Detective Torres appeared in the doorway. "We found something." She held up a manila folder filled with documents. "Insurance papers, but also correspondence between your husband and his mother. They've been planning this for months, Mrs. Mitchell, since before you got pregnant." Sarah's world crumbled a little more. "Before I got pregnant, it appears the pregnancy was part of the plan. Getting you pregnant would make you more vulnerable, more dependent on him. And if you died during childbirth, it would seem natural. Tragic, but natural." The rocking chair creaked as Sarah pushed herself up. She walked to the window overlooking their backyard. The garden she'd planted last spring was dying now. Autumn claiming the flowers she'd tended so carefully. "He got me pregnant to kill me," she said quietly. "We believe so." "Yes." Sarah turned back to Torres. "What kind of monster does that? The kind we're going to make sure never hurts anyone again." The baby kicked hard, as if agreeing. Sarah smiled through her tears. "She's going to be okay," she whispered. "We're both going to be okay." The next morning brought Detective Torres back to Sarah's door, this time with a thick file folder and a grim expression. Sarah had spent the night on the living room couch, unable to bear sleeping in the bed she'd shared with Rick. Every familiar object in the house felt contaminated now, tainted by the knowledge of his true intentions. "We've been investigating your husband's history," Torres said, settling into the chair across from Sarah. "What we've found is disturbing." Sarah poured herself herbal tea with hands that had finally stopped shaking. The baby had been active all night, perhaps sensing her mother's distress. "Dr. Warren had warned her about stress affecting the pregnancy. But how do you stay calm when you discover your husband planned to murder you?" "Tell me about Angela," Sarah said. "His first wife." Torres opened the file. "Angela Bennett Mitchell, 28 years old when she died. She was filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The settlement would have cost your husband significant money." Sarah remembered the framed photo of Angela that Rick kept in his home office. A beautiful blonde woman with a bright smile. Rick had told Sarah that looking at the photo helped him remember Angela the way she was before the accident. How did she die? Single-car accident on a rainy night. Her car went off the road into a ravine. No witnesses. By the time someone found her, she'd been dead for hours. Torres pulled out photographs from the accident scene. Sarah turned away, unable to look. "The investigating officers at the time ruled it accidental, but we found some inconsistencies." "What kind of inconsistencies?" Angela's car had been serviced the day before the accident. The mechanic noted that the brakes were in perfect condition, but when they examined the wreckage, the brake lines had been severed. Sarah's teacup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. "Someone cut her brakes." "It appears so, but the damage was attributed to the crash itself." The investigation was closed quickly. Torres showed Sarah another document. "This is Angela's life insurance policy. Your husband was the sole beneficiary. He collected $800,000. Sarah thought about their own life insurance policies. Rick had insisted on updating them multiple times over the years, always increasing the coverage amounts. "For your protection," he'd always said, "in case something happens to me." But now she understood the real purpose. "There's more," Torres continued. "We've been investigating his business dealings. 3 of his major competitors have died in the past 5 years, all ruled accidents or natural causes." Sarah's blood ran cold. 3. James Patterson, CEO of Patterson Technologies. Heart attack during a business lunch. No prior history of heart problems. Torres showed Sarah a photograph of a middle-aged man with kind eyes. Patterson's company was on the verge of securing a contract that would have cost your husband millions in lost revenue. Michael Roberts, founder of Roberts Industries, apparent suicide by drowning. He was found in his swimming pool after a dinner party at his home. Another photograph, another life cut short. David Chen, president of Chen Electronics, carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage. The door was found closed, engine running. Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. The morning was gray and overcast, matching her mood. You think Rick killed all of them? We think it's a pattern worth investigating. Each death directly benefited your husband's business interests? Sarah thought about the dinner parties Rick hosted, the business associates he entertained in their home. How many of those men were still alive? How many had become obstacles to Rick's success? Mrs. Mitchell, we need to ask you some difficult questions about your marriage. Sarah returned to the couch, steeling herself for more revelations. Has your husband ever been violent with you? No, never. He's actually very controlled. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't lose his temper. What about controlling behavior, monitoring your activities, limiting your contact with friends or family? Sarah considered this. Over the years, Rick had gradually influenced her decisions about where to work, who to spend time with, how to spend their money. But it had always seemed like carrying guidance, not control. He has strong opinions about things, she admitted. He thinks my sister's a bad influence. He doesn't like most of my friends. He says they're not ambitious enough. How many close friends do you have now compared to when you first married? The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. When she'd married Rick, she'd had a tight circle of girlfriends from college and work. Now, she could count her close friends on one hand. He didn't forbid me from seeing them, Sarah said quickly, but he always had reasons why I shouldn't. Claire was too negative. Jessica was jealous of my success. Amy was unmarried and wouldn't understand the demands of marriage. Torres made notes. What about your work? Has he influenced your career decisions? He encouraged me to leave my job at the marketing firm. He said it was too stressful, especially with the pregnancy. He wanted me to focus on being a mother. Sarah realized with growing horror how isolated she'd become. Rick had systematically removed every person who might have questioned his behavior or offered her alternative perspectives. Mrs. Mitchell, we found something else in your husband's office. Torres pulled out a leather journal. He kept detailed notes about your daily routine, what time you wake up, what you eat for breakfast. When you go grocery shopping, it reads like surveillance notes. Sarah's hands trembled as Torres showed her pages of Rick's careful handwriting, dates, times, locations. Her entire life reduced to data points in her husband's murder plan. October 1st, Sarah leaves for yoga class at 9 a.m., returns at 10:30, stops for coffee at Starbucks on Elm Street, predictable route. October 3rd, Sarah visits Dr. Warren alone, seems tired afterward, mentioned feeling dizzy during appointment, opportunity. October 7th, Sarah's friend Claire calls. Sarah seems upset after conversation, emotional vulnerability increasing. Sarah dropped her head into her hands. He was studying me, like a predator studies prey. We believe he was looking for the perfect opportunity, a time when you'd be alone and vulnerable, and your death could be explained as pregnancy complications. The baby kicked hard, and Sarah winced. Even in the womb, her daughter was fighting back. There's something else, Torres said gently. We've spoken with some of your husband's colleagues. Several mentioned that he seemed excited about the pregnancy in an unusual way. Not happy like an expectant father, but excited like someone anticipating a business opportunity. Sarah thought about Rick's behavior over the past few months, his insistence on updating their wills, his sudden interest in her medical appointments, the way he'd asked detailed questions about what the doctor said, how she was feeling, whether there were any complications. He was waiting for me to develop problems, Sarah realized, hoping the pregnancy would give him a natural excuse. And when that didn't happen, he decided to create his own opportunity. Sarah stood up and walked to the kitchen, needing to move, to do something with her hands. She began washing the dishes from her sleepless night, focusing on the simple task of soap and warm water. Mrs. Mitchell, we need to discuss your safety. While your husband is in custody, we believe his mother may still pose a threat. Sarah's grip tightened on the dish she was washing. Helen, we've been monitoring her communications. She's been in contact with some questionable individuals, people with criminal backgrounds. The dish slipped from Sarah's soapy hands, shattering against the kitchen floor. Just like yesterday's coffee mug, everything in her carefully ordered life was breaking apart. She wants to finish what Rick started, Sarah whispered. We think it's possible. The insurance money would still be substantial, even if the pregnancy complications angle is no longer available. Sarah looked down at the broken pieces of ceramic scattered across her kitchen floor, sharp edges and dangerous fragments, waiting to cut anyone who tried to clean them up, just like her marriage. Helen Mitchell arrived at Sarah's house without calling first, her silver sedan pulling into the driveway just as Detective Torres was leaving. Sarah watched through the living room window as her mother-in-law stepped out of the car, her movements sharp and deliberate despite her 65 years. Helen had never approved of Sarah. She'd made that clear from the first family dinner, when she'd asked pointed questions about Sarah's background, her family's financial status, her career ambitions. Rick had laughed it off as his mother being protective, but Sarah had always felt like she was being evaluated and found wanting. Now she wondered if Helen's disapproval ran deeper than simple maternal protectiveness. The doorbell rang twice, Helen's usual impatient pattern. Sarah took a deep breath and opened the door. Sarah, dear, Helen said, pushing past her into the house. We need to talk. Helen wore her usual uniform of expensive black clothing and pearls. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, and her pale blue eyes swept the living room with disapproval. I suppose you've heard about Richard's unfortunate situation? Helen continued, settling herself on the couch as if she owned it. Unfortunate situation. Sarah remained standing, her hand resting protectively on her belly. He tried to have me killed. Helen's expression didn't change. No shock, no denial, no maternal outrage at the accusation against her son. Men sometimes make poor decisions when they're under stress, Helen said calmly. Richard has been carrying a tremendous burden, trying to provide for you and the baby. Perhaps the pressure became too much. Sarah stared at her mother-in-law in disbelief. Are you defending him? I'm explaining him. There's a difference. Helen reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. I've come to make you an offer. Sarah, a generous settlement in exchange for your discretion. Sans my discretion. This doesn't have to become a public scandal. Richard has built an important business, one that employs hundreds of people. If you handle this quietly, I'm prepared to offer you $500,000. Sarah felt as if she was falling down a rabbit hole into an alternate reality. $500,000 to do what exactly? To disappear, change your name, move somewhere far away, start fresh. The baby doesn't need to grow up with the stigma of her father's mistakes. The casual way Helen referred to attempted murder as a mistake sent chills down Sarah's spine. And if I refuse, Helen's smile was cold as winter. I don't think you want to find out. Sarah walked to the kitchen, needing distance from Helen's toxic presence. She filled a glass with water, her hands shaking slightly. Through the window, she could see the unmarked police car parked across the street. Detective Torres had promised protection. But how do you protect someone from a threat that wears pearls and speaks in polite suggestions? You knew, Sarah said, returning to the living room. You knew what Rick was planning. Helen examined her manicured nails. I knew Richard was having difficulties in his marriage. Young wives can be very demanding, very expensive. Sometimes they need to be managed by murder, by whatever means necessary. The casual admission hit Sarah like a slap. Helen wasn't just enabling Rick's behavior, she was orchestrating it. Tell me about Angela, Sarah demanded. For the first time, Helen's composure cracked slightly. Angela was a mistake. Richard married her for the wrong reasons. When he realized his error, I helped him correct it. You helped him kill his first wife? I helped him protect his future. Angela was going to take half of everything in the divorce. She was vindictive, greedy. She would have destroyed him out of spite. Helen stood up and walked to the mantel, studying the wedding photos displayed there. You were supposed to be different, Sarah. Easier to control, more grateful for the opportunities Richard provided. But I wasn't grateful enough. You became demanding, expensive, and then you got pregnant, which complicated everything. Sarah's mind reeled. You encouraged the pregnancy. You kept asking when we were going to have children. Helen turned back to Sarah with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Pregnant women are vulnerable, dear, emotionally unstable, prone to accidents. If something had happened to you during childbirth, no one would have questioned it. These things happen. The baby kicked hard, and Sarah gasped. Helen's eyes fixed on Sarah's belly with an expression that made Sarah's blood run cold. It's not too late, Helen said quietly. Pregnancy complications can develop suddenly, especially in the final trimester. Sarah backed toward the kitchen, keeping distance between herself and Helen. The FBI knows about you. They're watching you. The FBI has suspicions, not proof. Richard was careful about our communications, and I've been very discreet in my arrangements. What arrangements? Helen walked towards Sarah with slow, deliberate steps. Richard may have been caught, but his goals remain valid. You're still a problem that needs to be solved. Sarah grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter, but Helen moved faster than expected for a woman her age. She knocked the phone from Sarah's hands, sending it clattering across the tile floor. I've spent 40 years protecting my son's interests, Helen hissed. I'm not going to stop now. Sarah ran for the front door, but Helen caught her arm. Despite her elegant appearance, Helen's grip was surprisingly strong. You have two choices, Helen said, her voice deadly calm. Take my offer and disappear quietly. Or refuse and discover that pregnancy complications can be very difficult to trace. Sarah wrenched her arm free and stumbled toward the living room window. The police car was still there, but the officers inside seemed focused on something else. You can't do this, Sarah said. Too many people know now. People have accidents all the time, even people under FBI protection. Helen reached into her purse again, but this time she didn't pull out a checkbook. Sarah caught a glimpse of something metallic before Helen's hand disappeared back into the bag. The money my family has accumulated over the years didn't come from Richard's business alone, Helen said conversationally. We've been solving problems for decades. Richard's father, God rest his soul, was very good at making difficulties disappear. Sarah's legs felt weak. The Mitchell family fortune wasn't built on legitimate business success. It was built on systematic elimination of obstacles. How many people have you killed? We prefer to think of it as strategic problem solving. Richard's father eliminated 3 business rivals over the years. I handled 2 of Richard's former girlfriends who became too demanding. And Richard himself has removed several impediments to his success. Helen moved closer, and Sarah could smell her expensive perfume, the same lavender scent she'd worn to every family gathering. Angela wasn't Richard's first wife to die in an accident, Helen continued. There was Rebecca before her. Sweet girl, but she discovered some irregularities in Richard's business practices, threatened to go to the authorities. Sarah's knees gave out, and she sank into a chair. How many wives has he had? You would have been number 4, but don't feel special, dear. You all serve the same purpose. The baby kicked frantically, as if trying to escape the toxic environment. Sarah wrapped her arms around her belly protectively. Why tell me all this? Sarah asked. Helen's smile was genuinely warm for the first time. Because I want you to understand the stakes. The Mitchell family has survived and prospered by eliminating threats. You can choose to remove yourself voluntarily, or we can remove you permanently. A car door slammed outside, and Helen glanced toward the window. Detective Torres was walking up the front path, her expression alert and focused. Think about my offer, Helen said, returning to her composed grandmother persona. For the baby's sake, if not your own. The doorbell rang, and Sarah hurried to answer it. Detective Torres stepped inside, immediately assessing the situation. Mrs. Mitchell, is everything all right? Just a family visit, Helen said smoothly. I came to check on Sarah during this difficult time. Torres studied Helen with suspicious eyes. Mrs. Helen Mitchell, I presume, Detective Torres, isn't it I've heard so much about you? The 2 women faced each other like predators sizing up their territory. Sarah could feel the tension crackling between them. Mrs. Mitchell, we'll need to speak with you about your son's case, Torres said. Of course, my lawyer will be in touch to schedule something convenient. Helen gathered her purse and moved toward the door. Sarah, dear, think about what we discussed. Time is a luxury you may not have much of. After Helen left, Torres turned to Sarah with concern. What did she want? To buy my silence. And when I refused, she threatened me. Torres pulled out her phone. We're moving you tonight. Pack whatever you need for a few weeks. As Sarah climbed the stairs to pack, she felt the baby moving restlessly inside her. Her daughter was going to be born into a world where her father and grandmother were killers, where her mother was a target for elimination, but Sarah was no longer the naive young woman who'd married Rick 5 years ago. The Mitchell family had underestimated her strength, her determination to protect her child. They were about to discover their mistake. Nancy Cooper had worked as Rick Mitchell's assistant for 3 years, organizing his calendar, managing his correspondence, and maintaining the carefully orchestrated facade of his professional life. She'd always prided herself on her discretion and efficiency, but as she sat in her car outside Sarah's temporary safe house, her hands trembling on the steering wheel, she realized that some secrets were too dangerous to keep. Sarah answered the door cautiously. The FBI had moved her to a modest apartment across town, complete with armed protection and new security protocols. The change from her spacious suburban home to this cramped space had been jarring, but Sarah was learning to find comfort in small, secure places. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Nancy Cooper. I work for your husband. Sarah recognized her immediately. Nancy had answered the phone countless times when Sarah called Rick's office, her voice always professional and pleasant. She was younger than Sarah had expected, with nervous brown eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Nancy, what are you doing here? I need to show you something. Something I found in Mr. Mitchell's files. Sarah led her inside, noting how Nancy's eyes darted around the apartment, checking corners and windows like someone expecting pursuit. Would you like some tea? Sarah offered, trying to put the younger woman at ease. No, thank you. We don't have much time. Mr. Mitchell doesn't know I'm here, but his mother has been calling the office. She's been asking questions about you, about your routine, about your new location. Sarah's blood ran cold. Helen knows where I am. Not yet, but she's trying to find out. She called 3 times yesterday, claiming she needed to send you something important. Nancy pulled a manila folder from her bag, her hands shaking as she opened it. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been going through Mr. Mitchell's computer files. What I found, it's worse than what the FBI told you. Sarah settled into the small apartment's only comfortable chair, one hand resting on her belly. The baby had been unusually quiet today, perhaps sensing her mother's constant state of alertness. Show me. Nancy spread documents across the coffee table, email printouts, financial records, research notes in Rick's careful handwriting. He's been planning this since before you got married, Nancy said quietly. Look at this. She showed Sarah an email dated 6 months before their wedding. Rick's message to an insurance agent discussed policy options for his future wife, with particular attention to pregnancy-related death benefits. He was shopping for the right insurance policy before he even proposed, Sarah whispered. It gets worse. Look at this research. Nancy showed her printed web pages about pregnancy complications, untraceable poisons, and methods for inducing premature labor. The browser history read like a manual for murdering pregnant women. He bookmarked articles about women who died during childbirth under suspicious circumstances. He was studying other cases, learning from them. Sarah's vision blurred as she read Rick's notes in the margins. Aconitine, naturally occurring, mimics heart attack. Digitalis, found in foxglove, causes cardiac arrhythmia. Both could trigger stress-induced labor complications. Nancy, where did you find these hidden folder on his computer? Password protected. I only found it because I was backing up his files and noticed some encrypted documents. Nancy pulled out another set of papers. But this is what made me come to you. This is what made me realize I couldn't stay silent. The documents showed financial transfers to a company called Domestic Solutions LLC, payments of $5,000 monthly for the past year. What is Domestic Solutions? It's a cleaning service, supposedly, but I did some research. The company doesn't exist. The address is a vacant lot. The phone number goes to a burner phone. Sarah studied the payment records. He was paying someone. For what? I think they were watching you, documenting your routine, your vulnerabilities, building a profile for the person who was supposed to kill you. Nancy showed Sarah the most damning evidence, a detailed report about Sarah's daily activities, complete with photographs taken from a distance. Sarah at the grocery store, at her yoga class, visiting her doctor, always alone, always vulnerable. Someone was stalking me for months, Sarah realized. The payments stopped 3 weeks ago, right around the time Mr. Mitchell made contact with the FBI informant. Sarah understood the timeline now. Rick had been preparing for months, gathering intelligence, studying her patterns. When he was ready to act, he terminated the surveillance and moved to the execution phase. Nancy, why are you showing me this? Why risk your job, your safety? Nancy's eyes filled with tears. Because I have a little sister. She's 24, just got married last year. When I saw what Mr. Mitchell was planning, I kept thinking about how easily it could be her. The young woman wiped her eyes with a tissue. And because there's something else, something that makes me think you're still in danger. What do you mean? Yesterday, Mrs. Helen Mitchell came to the office. She wanted access to Mr. Mitchell's computer, his files. I told her I couldn't allow that without proper authorization. Nancy's voice dropped to a whisper. She offered me $50,000 to copy his hard drive and send it to her. When I refused, she said it would be unfortunate if something happened to my sister. Sarah's protective instincts flared. She threatened your sister. She knew where my sister works, where she lives, what car she drives. Information I never gave her. The baby kicked hard, responding to Sarah's elevated stress. Sarah rubbed her belly absently, trying to calm both herself and her daughter. Nancy, you need to go to the FBI. Tell them everything you've told me. I'm scared. The Mitchell family has money, power, connections. What if the FBI can't protect us? Sarah understood Nancy's fear, but she also recognized the courage it had taken for the young woman to come forward. The FBI protected me when I needed it. They'll protect you too. Nancy nodded reluctantly. There's one more thing. Mrs. Mitchell asked me to find out about your medical records. She wanted to know about any complications with your pregnancy, any health issues that might make you vulnerable. My medical records are private. How could she access them? Money opens a lot of doors. And she mentioned having friends at the hospital where you deliver. Sarah's mind raced. Dr. Warren had mentioned that Sarah's delivery team would be carefully selected, all trusted professionals. But if Helen had connections at the hospital, she's planning to finish what Rick started, Sarah said. I think so, and I think she's planning to do it soon, before the baby is born. Nancy packed up the documents and handed the folder to Sarah. Keep these. The FBI will want copies of everything. As Nancy prepared to leave, Sarah caught her arm gently. Thank you for your courage, for protecting your sister, for protecting me and my baby. Just promise me you'll be careful. The Mitchell family doesn't forgive people who cross them. After Nancy left, Sarah called Detective Torres immediately. As she waited for the FBI agent to arrive, she spread Nancy's documents across the coffee table again, studying the evidence of her husband's systematic plan to eliminate her. The baby kicked, and Sarah spoke to her daughter quietly. We're going to be okay, sweetheart. We're going to survive this, and we're going to make sure no one else gets hurt. But even as she spoke the words, Sarah wondered if she could keep that promise. The Mitchell family had been eliminating obstacles for decades. They had money, connections, and experience with making people disappear. Sarah had something they didn't expect, though the determination of a mother protecting her child, and that, she was beginning to realize, might be the most powerful weapon of all. Claire Davidson had been Sarah's closest friend since college, the one person who'd maintained contact despite Rick's subtle disapproval over the years. When she appeared at Sarah's safe house apartment the next morning, her usually composed demeanor was shattered, her green eyes red from crying. I should have said something, were the first words out of Claire's mouth as Sarah opened the door. Gosh, Sarah, I should have said something years ago. Sarah guided her friend to the small living room, noting how Claire's hands shook as she clutched her coffee cup. They'd shared countless conversations over coffee during their friendship, but this one felt different, heavier, weighted with the kind of truth that changes everything. Said something about what? Sarah asked gently. Claire took a shuddering breath. About Rick. About the way he controlled you, isolated you, manipulated you. I saw it happening, and I told myself it wasn't my business. Sarah settled back in her chair, her hand resting on her belly. The baby had been active all morning, as if sensing her mother's emotional turmoil. Claire, you couldn't have known. But I did know. Or I suspected. I just didn't want to believe it. Claire pulled out her phone and scrolled through old text messages. Look at this conversation we had 6 months ago. She showed Sarah a text exchange from March. Claire had asked Sarah to join her for a girls' weekend in the mountains. Sarah's response was apologetic but firm. Rick thought it was too risky for a pregnant woman to travel to high altitude. He was concerned about her health, her safety. You wanted to come, Claire said. I could tell from your voice when we talked. But Rick had convinced you it was dangerous. Sarah remembered that weekend. She'd spent it alone while Rick attended a business conference, watching movies and organizing closets. The kind of solitary weekend that had become normal in her marriage. He did worry about my health, Sarah said, but the words felt hollow now. Sarah, I'm a nurse. I know about pregnancy and altitude. A weekend in the mountains at 7 months pregnant isn't dangerous for a healthy woman. Rick was lying to you. Claire showed her more messages, a pattern of declined invitations and canceled plans stretching back years. Always with Rick's reasonable-sounding concerns about Sarah's safety, her health, her need for rest. I thought he was being overprotective, Sarah admitted. Controlling, maybe, but not dangerous. I started keeping track, Claire said quietly. Not consciously at first, but I noticed things. How you stopped initiating plans. How you always had to check with Rick before confirming anything. How you started apologizing for him in conversations. Claire's voice grew stronger, fueled by guilt and anger. Last Christmas, at your party, I watched him work the room. He had something negative to say about everyone in your life. Your sister was irresponsible. Your college friends were bad influences. Your co-workers were jealous of your success. Sarah remembered that party. Rick had been charming and social, but afterwards he'd critiqued nearly every guest. At the time, Sarah had thought he was just being honest about people's flaws. Now she understood it was systematic character assassination. He was training me to distrust everyone except him, Sarah realized. And it worked. Over 5 years. He whittled down your support system until you were completely dependent on him. Claire leaned forward, her expression intense. Sarah, there's something else. Something I've never told you. Sarah braced herself for another revelation. 2 years ago, Rick called me. He said he was worried about you, that you'd been acting strangely. He asked me to watch for signs of depression, paranoia, instability. Sarah's blood ran cold. He was setting up a narrative. He told me that pregnancy might trigger mental health issues in you, that your family had a history of psychological problems. My family doesn't have any history of mental illness. I know that, but Rick was creating a story, planting seeds. If something had happened to you, if you died under suspicious circumstances, he would have had witnesses who could testify about your unstable mental state. Sarah thought about Rick's careful questions over the past few months. How was she feeling? Was she experiencing mood swings? Did she feel overwhelmed by the pregnancy? He'd framed it as caring concern, but now she understood he was documenting her responses for future use. He would have claimed I was suicidal, Sarah said. Pregnancy-induced depression leading to self-harm. That's what I think. And I was so stupid. I actually started watching you for signs of the problems he described. I was helping him build his case against you. Claire buried her face in her hands. I'm so sorry. Sarah, I was supposed to be your best friend, and I let him turn me into part of his conspiracy. Sarah reached across the small space between their chairs and squeezed Claire's hand. You couldn't have known his real intentions. But I knew something was wrong. I felt it every time we talked. You were disappearing, becoming a shadow of yourself. And I told myself it was just the natural changes that happen in marriage. The baby kicked, and Sarah winced slightly. Claire's nurse training kicked in immediately. Are you okay? How have you been feeling physically? Tired, stressed. The baby's been very active. Claire's expression grew concerned. Sarah, Have you had your recent test results reviewed by an independent doctor? What do you mean? Rick had access to your medical information. Right. He attended appointments, spoke with your doctor. Sarah nodded. Dr. Warren always included him in discussions about my care. What if he was influencing your treatment? What if he was trying to create the complications he needed? The thought sent ice through Sarah's veins. You think he was tampering with my medical care? I think he's capable of anything. And I think we need to get you examined by a doctor who has no connection to Rick or his family. Claire pulled out her phone. I know someone at the university hospital, Dr. Jennifer Walsh. She specializes in high-risk pregnancies. She can see you today. Claire, the FBI has been monitoring my medical care. The FBI is watching for external threats. They're not necessarily looking for medical sabotage. Sarah considered this. Rick had been present at every doctor's appointment, always asking detailed questions about her medication, her vitamin supplements, her treatment plan. She'd thought he was being an involved expectant father. What if he's been poisoning me slowly? Sarah whispered. What if those vitamins he insisted you take weren't vitamins? What if that tea he made you every morning contained something harmful? Sarah thought about her daily routine over the past few months. Rick had taken over many aspects of her care, bringing her special teas for morning sickness, ensuring she took her supplements, preparing healthy meals designed for pregnant women. He was controlling everything I put in my body, Sarah realized. We need to get you tested. Blood work, urine analysis, hair samples. If he's been slowly poisoning you, Dr. Walsh will find evidence. The baby kicked again, more forcefully this time. Sarah wondered if her daughter was trying to warn her about something, fighting against toxins that might be in her system. Claire, there's something else. Rick's assistant, Nancy, showed me evidence that he'd been planning this for months, maybe years. What kind of evidence? Sarah told Claire about the surveillance, the research into pregnancy complications, the systematic documentation of her routine. Claire's face grew paler with each revelation. He was studying you like a lab specimen, Claire said, planning the perfect crime. Nancy said Helen has connections at the hospital where I'm supposed to deliver. What if they're planning to finish what Rick started during the birth? Claire stood up abruptly, pacing the small apartment. That's it. We're going to Dr. Walsh today. We're getting you completely evaluated by someone the Mitchell family has never heard of. What if it's too late? What if whatever he's been giving me has already harmed the baby? Claire knelt beside Sarah's chair, taking her hands in both of hers. Sarah, you're 7.5 months pregnant with an active, healthy baby. If Rick was poisoning you, it wasn't working. Your body and your baby are stronger than his plan. The baby kicked as if in agreement, and Sarah smiled through her tears. We're going to beat them, Claire said fiercely. All of them. Rick, Helen, everyone who helped them. We're going to protect you and this baby, and we're going to make sure they never hurt anyone else. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months' hope. For the first time since the FBI knocked on her door, she wasn't just running from danger, she was fighting back. The county jail smelled of disinfectant and despair, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on concrete walls painted an institutional shade of green. Sarah hadn't wanted to come here, but Detective Torres had convinced her that facing Rick might provide crucial information about Helen's plans. He might let something slip, Torres had explained. Criminals often reveal more than they intend when they're trying to justify their actions. Now, sitting across from her husband in the small visiting room, Sarah wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Rick looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and plastic restraints, but his eyes held the same cold intelligence that had attracted her to him 5 years ago. You look well, Rick said, his gaze moving to her rounded belly. Pregnancy suits you. Sarah kept her hands folded on the table, fighting the urge to protect her belly from his scrutiny. The baby's healthy, despite your best efforts. Rick's smile was patient, condescending. You always had a flair for dramatics. Sarah, I suppose the FBI has filled your head with wild theories. Wild theories, I heard the recordings. Rick, your voice, planning my murder. You heard me exploring options with what I thought was a professional problem solver. Men in my position sometimes need to consider unpleasant alternatives. The casual way he referred to her murder as an unpleasant alternative made Sarah's skin crawl. Unpleasant for whom? Certainly not for you. Considering the insurance payout, $2 million is hardly significant money to someone in my position. It is when your company is hemorrhaging cash, when your latest acquisition is failing, when you need liquidity fast. Rick's composed expression flickered slightly. Sarah had done her homework, reviewing financial documents Torres had shared with her. Rick's business empire was built on debt and leveraged buyouts. Impressive on paper, but fragile in practice. You think you understand my business affairs? Rick asked. I understand that you've been liquidating assets quietly for months, that you've been moving money offshore, that you needed an insurance payout to cover debts you couldn't pay otherwise. Sarah leaned forward slightly. I also understand that I wasn't your first wife to die under convenient circumstances. Now Rick's mask slipped entirely. His eyes went hard and cold, the way they did when he was truly angry. Sarah had seen that look before, usually directed at business rivals or employees who disappointed him. Angela was a mistake, he said quietly. Young, beautiful, but ultimately too greedy for her own good. So you killed her. I solved a problem. Angela was going to take half of everything in the divorce. She was vindictive, determined to destroy me out of spite. Rick's voice took on the reasonable tone he used during business negotiations. Angela forced my hand, just like you did. How did I force your hand? By getting pregnant, by becoming expensive, by developing opinions about how our money should be spent. Sarah stared at her husband, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in their marriage. You got me pregnant on purpose, to create the opportunity to kill me? I got you pregnant because you wanted a child, because you were becoming restless, dissatisfied with your life. The pregnancy served multiple purposes. Rick's matter-of-fact admission sent chills through Sarah. Multiple purposes. It made you dependent on me. It isolated you from your friends and career. It provided the perfect cover for your eventual elimination. The baby kicked hard, as if responding to her father's casual dismissal of her existence. Sarah rubbed her belly protectively. And the baby, your own daughter? Rick shrugged. Children are expensive, time-consuming. I never particularly wanted to be a father. Sarah felt rage building in her chest, hot and pure. She's your child. She's a complication. If she died with you, that would have been simpler. But complications can be managed after birth as well. The threat was implicit but clear. Even from jail, Rick was planning harm to their daughter. You sick bastard, Sarah whispered. I'm practical. You always admired that about me. Remember my ability to make difficult decisions without emotional interference. Sarah remembered their early relationship, how impressed she'd been by Rick's business acumen, his ability to stay calm under pressure. She'd interpreted his detachment as strength. Now she understood it was pathology. What about Rebecca, your wife, before Angela? Rick raised an eyebrow. You've been thorough in your research. Was she a mistake too? Rebecca discovered some irregularities in my early business dealings. She threatened to go to the authorities unless I agreed to an expensive divorce settlement. Rick spoke about Rebecca's death with the same tone he might use to discuss a stock transaction. Carbon monoxide poisoning is particularly effective. Quick, relatively painless, easily attributed to accident. And Angela required a more dramatic solution. The brake line failure was my mother's suggestion. Actually, Helen has always been creative in her problem-solving approaches. Sarah's blood ran cold. Your mother helped you kill Angela. My mother has been protecting our family's interests for decades. She helped my father eliminate business rivals when necessary. She helped me handle Rebecca and Angela. She was prepared to help me handle you. The casual family collaboration in multiple murders was more horrifying than Sarah could have imagined. How many people have you killed? We prefer to think of it as strategic problem-solving. Over the years, perhaps a dozen individuals who pose threats to our family's prosperity. Rick leaned back in his chair, relaxed despite the restraints. You always underestimated my mother. Sarah, you thought she was just a demanding mother-in-law. But Helen built this family's wealth through careful elimination of obstacles. She's still planning to kill me. Helen is practical. With me in custody, the insurance money becomes even more important. The family needs liquidity. Rick's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement. Besides, you know too much now. About Angela, about Rebecca, about our business methods. You've become a liability that needs to be managed? Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the concrete floor. I'm not a liability. I'm a witness. And I'm going to testify against you and your psychotic mother. Sarah, Rick's voice was gentle, almost loving. You think you're safe because you're under FBI protection, but Helen has resources you can't imagine. Money, connections, professionals who specialize in making problems disappear. He leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. Even if you survive long enough to testify, do you really think you can protect our daughter forever? Children have accidents. Kidnappers make mistakes. Babysitters can be careless. The threat against her unborn child sent fury through Sarah like nothing she'd ever experienced. If you touch my daughter, our daughter, and I won't need to touch her, Helen will handle everything while I serve my sentence. When I'm eventually released, I'll inherit whatever's left of the family business, plus the insurance money from your unfortunate death. Sarah walked toward the door, then turned back. You made one mistake, Rick. What's that? You underestimated me. You thought I was weak, dependent, easily manipulated, but I survived 8 months of your poison. I survived your surveillance. I survived your murder plot, and I'm going to survive whatever Helen has planned. Rick's smile was cold. We'll see about that. As Sarah left the visiting room, her hands shaking with rage and adrenaline, she realized something important had shifted inside her. She was no longer the frightened victim who'd answered her door to find FBI agents with impossible news. She was a mother protecting her child, and that made her more dangerous than the Mitchell family could possibly imagine. Dr. Jennifer Walsh's office at University Hospital felt like a sanctuary compared to the sterile jail environment Sarah had left just hours earlier. The maternal fetal medicine specialist was a woman in her 50s with gentle hands and sharp eyes, the kind of doctor who inspired immediate confidence. Your friend Claire was right to bring you here, Dr. Walsh said, reviewing the test results spread across her desk. We found several concerning substances in your blood work. Sarah's heart sank. Poison? Not exactly poison, but medications that shouldn't be present in a pregnant woman? Low levels of benzodiazepines, unusual concentrations of certain vitamins that can be toxic in large amounts, and traces of herbal compounds that can affect blood pressure and heart rate. Dr. Walsh showed Sarah the lab printouts. Individually, none of these would be immediately dangerous, but together, over time, they could cause the exact complications your husband was hoping for. Premature labor, cardiac stress, pregnancy-induced hypertension. He was slowly trying to kill me. He was creating conditions that would make your death during childbirth seem natural. Very sophisticated, actually. If you'd delivered at your regular hospital with your regular doctor, the elevated levels might have been attributed to pregnancy stress. Sarah thought about the special teas Rick had prepared for her every morning, the prenatal vitamins he'd insisted on purchasing from a specialty pharmacy, the herbal supplements Helen had brought during her visits. How long has this been going on? Based on the hair sample analysis, probably 4 to 5 months, since early in your second trimester? Sarah's hand moved protectively to her belly. What about the baby? Is she okay? Dr. Walsh smiled reassuringly. Your daughter is remarkably healthy. Her heart rate is strong, her growth is normal, and her activity level indicates excellent neurological development. Despite the poisoning, your body did an amazing job protecting her. Maternal systems are designed to sacrifice for the fetus. You absorb most of the harmful substances, shielding your baby from the worst effects. Sarah felt a surge of fierce maternal pride. Even while being slowly poisoned, her body had protected her daughter. Dr. Walsh, I'm supposed to deliver at Riverside Medical Center with Dr. Warren, but we've learned that my husband's mother may have connections there. Given what we've discovered, I'd recommend delivering here instead. University Hospital has no connections to your husband's family, and our security protocols are more comprehensive. Dr. Walsh pulled out another set of documents. There's something else we need to discuss. The prosecutor's office called this morning. They want to know if you're willing to testify against your husband and his mother. Sarah had been dreading this conversation. Testifying meant reliving the trauma, exposing herself to public scrutiny, and potentially putting herself and her baby at greater risk. What would that involve? A grand jury hearing first, then potentially a trial. You'd be the star witness in a conspiracy to commit murder case. Dr. Walsh leaned forward. Sarah, I've been treating high-risk pregnancies for 20 years. I've never seen anything like this. The systematic nature of what your husband did, the planning involved, the family collaboration, this isn't just about you anymore. What do you mean? How many other women might be at risk if this family has been eliminating inconvenient wives for decades? How many future victims could your testimony prevent? Sarah thought about Angela, about Rebecca, about the business rivals Rick had mentioned so casually. How many lives could she save by speaking up? The prosecutor warned me that Rick's defense team will try to destroy my credibility. They'll paint me as an unstable, greedy wife who fabricated everything for money. They'll try, but the physical evidence is overwhelming. The poisoning, the surveillance, the recorded conversations with the FBI informant. Your testimony would just be the final piece of an already strong case. Dr. Walsh showed Sarah another document. The prosecutor also mentioned that several other women have come forward since your husband's arrest. Wives of his business associates who've experienced similar patterns of control and isolation? Sarah's eyes widened. Other victims, potential victims, women who recognize the signs now that this case has become public. Your courage in coming forward may have saved their lives. The baby kicked strongly, and Sarah rubbed her belly absently. What about protection if I testify? Helen will definitely try to kill me. The FBI is prepared to provide comprehensive witness protection, new identity, relocation, ongoing security until the threat is neutralized. But that means my daughter grows up in hiding. She never knows her real name, her family history, her roots. Dr. Walsh nodded sympathetically. It's an impossible choice. Safety versus freedom. Justice versus personal peace. Sarah stood up and walked to the window overlooking the hospital parking lot. Normal people going about their normal lives, unaware that a few floors above them, a woman was deciding whether to risk everything to stop a family of killers. Doctor, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you have children? 2 daughters, both adults now? What would you do if you were in my position? Doctor. Walsh was quiet for a long moment. I'd think about what kind of world I want my daughters to inherit. A world where wealthy families can eliminate inconvenient women without consequences, or a world where victims fight back and protect future generations. Sarah thought about her unborn daughter, about the strong kicks that had reassured her throughout this nightmare. Her child was a fighter, just like her mother was becoming. There's something else to consider, Doctor, Walsh continued. Your husband made threats against your daughter during your jail visit. Even if you disappear, Helen Mitchell might still pursue you. Testifying and ensuring their conviction might be your best path to true safety. You think they'll keep hunting us? I think they view you as an ongoing threat. They know you have information that could expose decades of crimes. Hiding might only delay the inevitable confrontation. Sarah returned to her chair, decision crystallizing in her mind. If I testify, what happens to my medical care? The baby's due in 6 weeks. I'll personally oversee your care until delivery. After that, the Witness Protection Program includes comprehensive medical coverage. And if something goes wrong during the birth, if Helen has people at this hospital too, Dr. Walsh's expression grew fierce. I've been practicing medicine for 25 years. I've never lost a patient to outside interference, and I'm not starting now. Sarah felt the baby move, a gentle roll that seemed like agreement. Her daughter wanted to be born into a world where her father and grandmother couldn't hurt anyone else. Doctor, I need to call Detective Torres. I want to testify. Dr. Walsh smiled. I think you're making the right choice. As Sarah dialed Torres's number, she thought about the conversation she'd have with her daughter someday. Not about how her father tried to kill them, but about how her mother chose to fight back. About how sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the most necessary one. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Fighter, Sarah thought with pride, just like her mother. The federal courthouse downtown had been Sarah's second home for the past 3 weeks as the trial of Richard Mitchell proceeded. Now, 8.5 months pregnant and moving carefully, She prepared to take the witness stand as the prosecution's final witness. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal observers, and curious members of the public drawn by the sensational nature of the case. Sarah tried to ignore the cameras and focus on the friendly face of Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Chen, who had prepared her extensively for this moment. Mrs. Mitchell, please state your relationship to the defendant. Ada Chen began. Richard Mitchell is my husband. Sarah's voice was steady, though her hands rested protectively on her belly. And you are currently how far along in your pregnancy? 34 weeks. Due in 6 weeks. Mrs. Mitchell, I want to take you back to the morning of October 15th when FBI agents came to your home. Sarah recounted that terrible morning, describing the coffee mug shattering on the kitchen floor, the impossible words the agents spoke, the recordings of Rick planning her murder. Her voice remained calm and factual, just as Ada Chen had coached her. How did you feel when you heard your husband's voice on those recordings? Shocked, disbelieving, then terrified. He was discussing my death like a business transaction. Rick's defense attorney, a sharp-featured man named David Brooks, objected repeatedly, trying to disrupt Sarah's testimony. But Judge Martinez sustained most of the prosecution's objections, allowing Sarah to tell her story completely. Mrs. Mitchell, did your husband ever physically abuse you during your marriage? No, his control was more subtle. He gradually isolated me from friends and family, influenced my career decisions, monitored my activities. I didn't recognize it as abuse at the time. Sarah described the systematic poisoning Dr. Walsh had discovered, the surveillance documents Nancy Cooper had found, the insurance policies Rick had updated throughout their marriage. At any point during your marriage, did you suspect your husband might want to harm you? Sarah considered this carefully. There were moments when I felt uneasy, times when his behavior seemed calculated rather than loving, but I attributed it to his personality, his business training. I never imagined he was capable of murder. Ada Chen showed Sarah the surveillance photos taken by Rick's hired watchers. Mrs. Mitchell, do you recognize these images? Yes, they're photographs of me going about my daily routine, grocery shopping, attending yoga class, visiting my doctor. Someone was watching me for months without my knowledge. How does it feel to see these photographs now? Violated, hunted, like I was prey being studied by a predator. The baby kicked during Sarah's testimony, and she paused to breathe through a strong contraction. Judge Martinez called a brief recess, allowing Sarah to compose herself. When court resumed, Ada Chen asked about Rick's family history. Mrs. Mitchell, did your husband ever discuss his previous wives with you? He told me his first wife, Angela, died in a car accident. He said it was very traumatic for him, that it made him protective of me. Did he mention any other previous wives? No, I learned about Rebecca only during the FBI investigation. Sarah testified about her jail visit with Rick, his casual admission of multiple murders, his threats against their unborn daughter. Several jurors looked visibly disturbed by this testimony. Mrs. Mitchell, why did you decide to testify in this case? Sarah looked directly at the jury. Because I want my daughter to grow up in a world where men can't murder their wives for insurance money. Because other women deserve to know the warning signs I missed. Because Rick and his mother have been killing people for decades, and it has to stop. When Ada Chen finished her direct examination, defense attorney Brooks approached for cross-examination. Sarah braced herself for the attack she knew was coming. Mrs. Mitchell, isn't it true that you and your husband were having serious marital problems? We had differences of opinion about some things, but I wouldn't characterize them as serious problems. Weren't you planning to leave him? No, I wasn't. Isn't it true that you were having an affair with your friend Claire Davidson? Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. That's absolutely false. Isn't it true that you fabricated this entire story to avoid a messy divorce and secure the insurance money for yourself? No, everything I've testified to is true. Brooks tried various angles of attack, suggesting Sarah was mentally unstable, financially motivated, or in collusion with the FBI to frame an innocent man. But Sarah's testimony remained consistent, backed up by overwhelming physical evidence. Mrs. Mitchell, if your husband really wanted to kill you, why are you still alive? Because the person he hired to kill me was an FBI informant. Because law enforcement intervened before he could complete his plan. But you have no proof that he actually intended to go through with it. Do you? Sarah stared at Brooks incredulously. He paid money to someone he believed was a hitman. He provided detailed plans for my murder. He systematically poisoned me for months. What more proof could there be? During a particularly aggressive line of questioning, Sarah felt another strong contraction. She gripped the witness stand, breathing through the pain. Your Honor, Ada Chen interjected. The witness is in active labor. Judge Martinez immediately called for a recess and summoned paramedics. As Sarah was helped from the courtroom, she caught sight of Rick's face. Instead of concern for his wife and unborn child, she saw only irritation at the disruption to his defense. Dr. Walsh met Sarah at the hospital emergency entrance. How are you feeling? Like I'm about to give birth on the courthouse steps, Sarah managed between contractions. Well, let's get you upstairs and see how close we are. In the labor and delivery ward, Dr. Walsh examined Sarah quickly. You're in early labor, but we have time. The contractions are still irregular. Can I finish my testimony? Sarah, you've done enough. Your testimony was powerful and complete. The jury heard everything they need to know, but Sarah shook her head stubbornly. I want to finish. I want to look that jury in the eye and make sure they understand what kind of monster they're dealing with. Dr. Walsh consulted with the judge by phone. An unprecedented arrangement was made. Court would reconvene in the hospital conference room, with only essential personnel present. 2 hours later, court reconvened in the hospital conference room. Sarah, now in a hospital gown with monitors tracking her contractions, faced the jury one final time. Mrs. Mitchell, Ada Chen said gently, do you have anything else you'd like to tell the jury? Sarah looked at each juror individually, her voice strong despite the pain of early labor. I want you to understand that this isn't just about me and my baby. Rick Mitchell and his mother have been eliminating people for decades. Business rivals, inconvenient wives, anyone who threatened their wealth or power. A contraction hit, and Sarah paused, breathing through it before continuing. If you let them get away with this, other women will die. Other families will be destroyed. My daughter is fighting to be born right now, and I want her to enter a world where monsters like her father are held accountable. Defense attorney Brooks made one final attempt at cross-examination, but his questions seemed petty and cruel in the face of Sarah's obvious pain and courage. Mrs. Mitchell, isn't this all very convenient, going into labor during your testimony, playing for the jury's sympathy? Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. Mr. Brooks, I'm 34 weeks pregnant with a baby whose father tried to kill us both. There's nothing convenient about any of this. Judge Martinez ended the session there. The witness is excused. Court will recess until Mrs. Mitchell has delivered her baby safely. As the legal teams filed out, Dr. Walsh checked Sarah's progress. You're at 4 centimeters. We're definitely having a baby today. Good, Sarah said through gritted teeth. I want her born free, with her father behind bars where he belongs. The next 6 hours blurred together in a haze of contractions, breathing exercises, and the steady encouragement of Dr. Walsh and Claire, who had rushed to the hospital as soon as she heard the news. Detective Torres stopped by during Sarah's labor, bringing news from the courthouse. The jury's been deliberating for 3 hours. They've asked to review the audio recordings twice. What does that mean? Sarah asked between contractions. It means they're taking this seriously. They're examining every piece of evidence. At 11:37 p.m., Emma Mitchell entered the world with a strong cry that echoed through the delivery room. Dr. Walsh placed the baby on Sarah's chest, and Sarah felt overwhelming love flood through her as she looked into her daughter's alert dark eyes. She's perfect, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. She's absolutely perfect. Emma weighed 6 pounds, 2 ounces, and despite being slightly premature, showed no signs of the complications Rick had hoped to cause. Her lungs were strong, her reflexes excellent, her coloring healthy and pink. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a very determined spirit, Dr. Walsh announced. Just like her mother. Claire took pictures while Torres made phone calls, updating the prosecutor's office on the birth. The strange, surreal quality of giving birth while her husband was on trial for trying to kill them both wasn't lost on Sarah. But she pushed those thoughts aside to focus on her daughter. Emma latched on immediately for her first feeding, her tiny fist gripping Sarah's finger with surprising strength. "You're a fighter," Sarah murmured to her daughter. "Just like we knew you would be." At 2 a.m., Detective Torres returned with news. The jury reached a verdict, guilty on all counts. First-degree conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, racketeering conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. Sarah closed her eyes in relief. And Helen? Still at large, but we'll find her. With Rick's conviction, several other victims have come forward. We're building a comprehensive case against the entire Mitchell criminal enterprise. Sarah looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "It's over, sweetheart. You're safe now." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah knew their fight wasn't completely finished. Helen Mitchell was still out there, still dangerous, still committed to eliminating threats to her family's interests. However, for tonight, in this hospital room surrounded by people who cared about them, Sarah and Emma were protected. And Sarah had proven something important to herself and the world. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a survivor, a fighter, and a mother who would do anything to protect her child. Emma stirred in her arms, making soft baby sounds, and Sarah smiled. "Welcome to the world, my brave girl. We're going to be just fine." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of her new home in Portland, Oregon, watching 18-month-old Emma take tentative steps between the coffee table and the couch. The late afternoon sun streamed through windows that overlooked a small garden where Sarah had planted flowers for the first time since leaving her old life behind. "Come on, Emma," Sarah encouraged, holding out her arms. "You can do it, sweetheart." Emma took 3 wobbly steps before plopping down on her bottom with a giggle. She had Rick's dark hair, but Sarah's green eyes, and thankfully showed no signs of her father's calculating nature. Instead, she was curious, affectionate, and remarkably resilient for a child who'd been born into such traumatic circumstances. The Witness Protection Program had given them new identities, new social security numbers, and a modest house in a quiet neighborhood where Sarah worked as a freelance marketing consultant. It wasn't the luxurious lifestyle she'd known with Rick, but it was honest, peaceful, and entirely their own. Detective Torres, now retired from the FBI, visited every few months to check on them and provide updates on the ongoing investigations. The Mitchell family's criminal enterprise had unraveled completely after Rick's conviction, with Helen finally arrested in Switzerland trying to access hidden bank accounts. "More women keep coming forward," Torres had explained during her last visit. "Wives of Rick's business associates, former employees who witnessed suspicious deaths, even some of Helen's old neighbors who remember strange accidents happening to people who crossed the family." The final count was staggering: 14 suspicious deaths over 30 years, all connected to the Mitchell family's business interests or personal relationships. Rick and Helen were both serving life sentences, and several accomplices had been arrested and convicted. Sarah had testified in 3 additional trials, always with Emma in the courthouse nursery, protected by federal marshals. Each time, she found it easier to tell her story, to help juries understand the systematic nature of the Mitchell family's crimes. Claire visited frequently, having relocated to Portland to be closer to Sarah and Emma. She'd become Emma's unofficial aunt, showering the little girl with books and toys and unconditional love. "Any word from the publisher?" Claire asked, settling into Sarah's living room with a cup of tea. Sarah had been writing a book about her experience, partly as therapy and partly to help other women recognize the warning signs of domestic abuse and control. Several publishers had expressed interest, drawn by the dramatic nature of her story and her insights into psychological manipulation. "They want to move forward with publication," Sarah said, watching Emma stack blocks with intense concentration. "But they want me to use my real name, not my protected identity." "And what does that mean for your safety?" "The FBI says the threat level has decreased significantly with Helen in prison and the family assets frozen, but using my real name would mean giving up witness protection permanently." Sarah had been struggling with this decision for weeks. Publishing the book under her real name would help more women, reach a broader audience, and potentially prevent future tragedies. But it would also expose her and Emma to whatever remained of the Mitchell family's network. "What does your gut tell you?" Claire asked. Sarah picked up Emma, who had tired of her blocks and was reaching for her mother. "My gut tells me that hiding forever isn't really living. Emma deserves to know her real name, her real history, and other women deserve to hear this story from the person who actually lived it. Dr. Walsh, who had become both a friend and Emma's pediatrician, had weighed in on the decision during their last appointment. Emma is healthy, happy, and developing beautifully, she'd said. Children are remarkably adaptable. If you decide to reclaim your identity, she'll adjust. The doorbell rang, interrupting Sarah's thoughts. Through the peephole, she saw a young woman with nervous eyes and a manila folder clutched in her hands. Sarah Mitchell, the woman asked when Sarah opened the door. I'm Jennifer Adams. I think my husband might be trying to kill me. Sarah invited Jennifer inside, settling her in the living room while Emma played quietly nearby. Over the next hour, Jennifer told a story that was disturbingly familiar. A controlling husband who'd isolated her from friends and family, mysterious health problems that doctors couldn't explain, a recent increase in her life insurance coverage that she hadn't requested. I saw you on the news during the trial, Jennifer explained. When you described how your husband controlled your daily routine, monitored your activities, it was like you were describing my life. Sarah listened carefully, asking gentle questions, helping Jennifer recognize the patterns that had taken Sarah years to understand. By the end of the conversation, they developed a safety plan and connected Jennifer with domestic violence resources and legal advocacy. Thank you, Jennifer said as she prepared to leave. I thought I was going crazy, but you made me understand that my instincts were right. After Jennifer left, Sarah sat in her garden while Emma napped, thinking about the decisions she needed to make. In the past 6 months, she'd received dozens of calls and visits from women who recognized elements of their own relationships in her story. Each conversation reminded her of the power of speaking truth, of refusing to let abusers operate in secrecy. That evening, Sarah called Detective Torres. I've made my decision about the book, Sarah said. I'm going to publish it under my real name. Are you sure once that information is public, there's no going back to anonymity? I'm sure Emma and I can't spend our lives hiding from shadows, and if my story prevents even one woman from going through what I experienced, it's worth the risk. Torres was quiet for a moment. Sarah, I want you to know that what you did, testifying against Rick and Helen, was one of the bravest things I've witnessed in 20 years of law enforcement. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified most of the time. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear, especially when you're protecting someone you love. After hanging up, Sarah checked on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully in her crib. Her daughter's face was serene, completely trusting in her mother's ability to keep her safe. We're going to be okay, baby girl, Sarah whispered. We survived the worst they could do to us. We're stronger now. The next morning, Sarah called her publisher and agreed to proceed with the book under her real name. The title would be Surviving the Perfect Marriage, A Mother's Fight Against a Family of Killers. Within hours of the announcement, her phone began ringing with interview requests from national media outlets. The story of the pregnant woman who'd survived her husband's murder plot and brought down a multi-generational criminal conspiracy had captured public imagination. Sarah accepted carefully selected interviews, always with the goal of educating women about domestic abuse warning signs. She spoke about the subtle nature of psychological control, the way abusers isolated their victims, the importance of trusting instincts even when circumstances seem perfect on the surface. Emma, now walking confidently, accompanied Sarah to several interviews, charming producers and cameras alike. She was living proof that survivors could build beautiful, normal lives after escaping abuse. What do you want people to take away from your story? One interviewer asked. That fairy tale marriages don't exist, Sarah replied, Emma playing quietly at her feet. Real love doesn't require you to give up your friends, your career, your autonomy. Real love doesn't monitor your movements or control your choices. And what would you say to women who might be in similar situations right now? Sarah looked directly into the camera. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. You don't need proof of abuse to leave a relationship that makes you feel small or afraid or isolated. And remember that it's never too late to fight back. The book became a bestseller, leading to speaking engagements at domestic violence conferences and university seminars. Sarah established a foundation to help women escape abusive relationships, funded by her book royalties and speaking fees. On Emma's second birthday, they had a small party in their Portland garden, surrounded by their chosen family of Claire, Dr. Walsh, Detective Torres, and several women Sarah had helped escape dangerous relationships. As Emma blew out her candles with help from her mother, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. 2 years ago, she'd been an isolated, poisoned woman married to a killer, unaware that her life was in constant danger. Now she was financially independent, emotionally healthy, and using her experience to help others. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Sarah told Emma, who clapped her hands excitedly as the candles went out. Sarah made her own wish silently for continued safety, for the strength to keep helping other women, and for Emma to grow up knowing that she was loved, protected, and free. That evening, after the guests had gone home and Emma was asleep, Sarah sat in her garden reading a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from a woman in Minnesota whose husband had been arrested after she'd recognized abuse patterns from Sarah's book. "You saved my life," the letter concluded. "My children will grow up safe because you had the courage to tell your story." Sarah folded the letter carefully and added it to the box where she kept similar messages from women around the country. Each letter reminded her that speaking out had been the right choice, that Emma's safety hadn't been compromised by reclaiming their real names. Emma stirred on the baby monitor, making soft sleep sounds that brought a smile to Sarah's face. Her daughter was healthy, happy, and completely unaware that her father had once planned to kill them both. Someday, when Emma was older, Sarah would tell her age-appropriate versions of their story. She would explain that sometimes people do terrible things, but that good people always fight back. For now, though, Emma's world consisted of picture books and garden flowers, birthday parties with chosen family, and a mother who would do anything to protect her. Sarah looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Thank you," she whispered to whatever force had helped them survive. "Thank you for making us stronger than our worst enemy." Inside the house, Emma's soft breathing continued over the monitor, the sound of new life thriving in safety and love. They had built something beautiful from the ashes of the worst experience imaginable. And tomorrow, Sarah would continue the work of helping other women do the same. "One step at a time, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, echoing the words she'd spoken to Emma during her first tentative steps. "That's how we get anywhere that matters." The garden around her was full of flowers she'd planted with her own hands, in soil that belonged to them, in a life they'd built through courage and determination. Emma would grow up here, strong and free, knowing that her mother had fought monsters and won. It was, Sarah realized, the perfect ending to what had once seemed like an impossible story. Not because everything was perfect, but because they had survived, thrived, and found their way home to themselves. If this story left you questioning everything you thought you knew about domestic abuse and family secrets, hit that like button. It helps more people discover these important true crime stories. Drop a comment below about which part shocked you most. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to hear Sarah's message about trusting their instincts. Subscribe and ring that notification bell, because next week we're diving into another case where the person you trust most becomes your greatest threat. Remember, sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one sleeping next to you.